You're fired, you useless liar.
With that, David, my manager, ended the call with a mocking tone. Staring blankly, I put away my phone and held my head in my hands. I had to explain to the train conductor about the accident that had just happened at the crossing, but my mind couldn't focus. When I glanced up, I saw the girl I had rescued watching me with a worried expression. As I tried to place her familiar face, I realized it was Amelia. I couldn't believe it. The girl whose life I had saved was someone I knew. Several sleek black luxury cars pulled up, and from the back seat of the lead car, a familiar man stepped out. Hearing about the accident that nearly occurred here, Henry looked shocked.
Mark, thank you for saving my granddaughter.
I just acted without thinking in the moment. This encounter with Henry marked the beginning of my revenge against David. My name is Mark Hayes. I'm a 40-year-old guy whose hobby is working out. It's not that I was particularly interested in fitness or exercise. I just didn't have any other hobbies and decided to start going to the gym for my health. At first, I quietly ran on the treadmill or swam in the pool. But as I got to know more people at the gym, my motivation for building my body grew. Among those I frequently see, the one I meet the most is Henry. Henry is 60 years old, but he looks young enough to be about 50.
Good morning. Another good workout today, Mark.
Maybe because his warm demeanor and voice remind me a bit of my grandfather, I feel relieved whenever he greets me. But Henry apparently has no athletic ability to speak of. He frequently trips or stumbles over nothing at all. It seems that back when he was around 50, he thought it wouldn't be good to age like this and started going to the gym. While he's built up his stamina, his athletic skills haven't improved despite his efforts. Now, he's given up and comes to the gym mainly to see the many friends he's made there. Recently, his granddaughter has started coming to the gym too, so I've been happy to gain another acquaintance. Henry's granddaughter is named Amelia. She's stunningly beautiful, with a presence that draws everyone's attention, and she might even become a model someday.
Thank you for always looking after my grandpa. Here, if you'd like, please take this.
The sweets Amelia occasionally brings as gifts are delicious, and her friendly nature, always greeting everyone without a hint of shyness, has made her the gym sweetheart. Whenever Henry or Amelia comes to the gym, their presence instantly brightens the atmosphere. The time I spend chatting casually with them is so enjoyable that I hope they continue coming to the gym. But lately, Henry's company has been struggling with a particular deal that isn't going well. He's been looking more and more downcast each day and has stopped coming to the gym as often. Henry, as it turns out, is the president of a company that deals in electronics. Since he's the person I'm closest to at the gym, even though it's not my business, I can't help but hope the issue at his company gets resolved. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. I can at least lend an ear if you need to vent. I'd said this to him before, but he hasn't taken me up on the offer, which frustrates me. Is there any way I can lend him a hand? In early October, Halloween decorations began appearing all over town. Whenever I saw decorations that seemed like something Amelia, with her love of cute things, would enjoy, I took a photo or two on my way to work. That day, I found another unique decoration and stopped to take a picture. Oops, I shouldn't get too caught up in this. Realizing I'd been lost in taking photos, I snapped back to reality and checked my watch. I was running much later than usual to work. Panicking, I stuffed my phone into the chest pocket of my suit and hurried off to the office. I work for a company that deals in electronics. It's not a big name, but in areas farther from the city center, it's fairly well known. I work in the sales department, but something upsetting happened recently. I was taken off a $20 million deal I had been working on for some time. The reason was the harassment of my manager, David. In his 60s, David looks at least 10 years older than he is. His body is rounded, which is a key feature. He must not exercise much, as he's always out of breath after even a short walk. When I arrived at the office, I could hear David's voice.
Seriously, young people these days are so spoiled. Because of them, even the other generations start acting entitled. It's just ridiculous.
It seemed like he was scolding a younger male employee. The young man stood before him, slumped over.
But, David, I'm really not feeling well.
You said the same thing last time and went home. You just got here. Can't you tough it out a little longer?
Well, but I.
The young man, who looked pale and unwell, seemed to be struggling. If left alone, he might collapse. Unaware or uncaring of his team member's condition, David continued his lecture. Thinking the young man might be forced to work despite his condition, I stepped in between them. Now, David, he's been a diligent worker so far. Maybe he's just worn out. I think we should let him leave early. Hey, you over there, could you escort him out of the building? Speaking as calmly as possible to avoid escalating things, I handed the exhausted employee off to another worker and got him sent home. David scowled at me as if to say, "Why are you always interfering with me?"
You're always disagreeing with me.
David seemed about to launch into a tirade, but luckily the start of work chime rang, sparing me from further trouble. Grateful for the reprieve, I quickly settled at my desk and got to work. David is the type of person who doesn't tolerate excuses or complaints. He seems to believe that because he's been able to overcome challenges, others should be able to as well. What he doesn't seem to understand is that everyone experiences difficulties and sadness differently. This lack of understanding often leads him to impose his opinions on others, causing frequent issues. Because I often voice my opinions against him, I've become his scapegoat. In fact, David removed me from the $20 million deal I had been handling, saying, "Don't get cocky, Mark. If I want to continue in this department, it would probably be best not to defy him, but I just can't ignore him." A few days later, while working in the sales department, I noticed a female colleague looking troubled. In her 40s, she had been dealing with back pain lately and was rubbing her lower back. After carrying a stack of documents to the shredder, she looked tired and was gingerly trying to ease the strain on her back, so I spoke up. "Are you okay? If there's more, I can take over for you."
I appreciate it, but if David sees, he'll get mad at me. I'll be fine.
She glanced around the office, checking to see if David was nearby before continuing.
Actually, just earlier, he told me, if you're not getting results, at least take care of the grunt work. So I've been doing all this stuff. But, well, it's exhausting when you're not used to it, you know?
Her sales performance hadn't been great the previous month, so David must have said something to her about it. Sighing heavily, she muttered, "I wish someone else would be the manager instead of him." Fortunately, it seemed her work was done for the moment, so there wasn't anything for me to help with, but scenes like this had become commonplace. Since David took over as manager, people have been pushing themselves too hard in various ways. At this rate, someone is bound to break down, or perhaps the male colleague who recently left early was already the first case. Sure, there are plenty of other workplaces with terrible conditions and overbearing bosses. Compared to those, our workplace might be slightly better, but that doesn't mean we have to stay silent. It's better to find ways to improve things than to let someone burn out and leave. Just then, David returned to the office, talking on his phone. From his tone, it was clear he was irritated.
Thanks for earlier. Yeah, I made it back to the office safely. Seriously, can't they do something about that always closed crossing on my commute? And the road paving is so shoddy. It's such a rough ride.
From the way he sounded, he was likely to lash out at someone again. I have to stay alert in case that happened, but this situation couldn't continue indefinitely. Maybe I should consult with a senior executive or bring it up in company counseling. There were several options, but which would be the most effective? While I was considering this, David finished his call and spoke to me.
Mark, remember the deal I reassigned the other day? You take it over again.
What? His unexpected words made me blurt out a dumbfounded response. What do you mean by that?
Exactly what I said. The employee who took over for you fell ill and will be on extended leave. We need someone to fill the gap. It's a $20 million deal, so failure is not an option.
I didn't mind taking it back, but would the client be okay with all these sudden changes? David, I don't think this is a good idea. This deal isn't something that needs to be rushed. Wouldn't it be better to wait for the original employee to recover and return?
If we do that, the deal will be delayed, and that'll cost the company.
I voiced my concerns, but David dismissed them outright.
If you show sincerity and apologize, or whatever it takes, you can smooth things over. Just quietly get it done. If the client is upset, all you have to do is work until they forgive you.
David seems to believe that anything can be achieved with enough effort. While it's true that effort isn't entirely ineffective, there are things that just won't work out no matter how hard you try. He has probably only dealt with people who are receptive to his way of thinking until now. That said, I had no right to refuse it, so all I could do was respond, "Understood. I'll do everything I can." Having agreed to take over the deal, I immediately started looking into how far the negotiations had progressed. With so many changes in the person handling the account, the client might have developed distrust toward our company. Whether or not it will go well, I should at least make an effort to convey sincerity, as David suggested. I began preparing a gift box of sweets to bring and identifying points where we could make concessions to increase the client's benefits. There was no guarantee they would accept it, but it was better than doing nothing. As a result, my workload piled up and I ended up working overtime for 3 days straight. That's why nearly oversleeping that morning might have been inevitable. It was the morning of the fourth day since David told me about the reassignment. As winter's cold gradually set in, I woke up to the crisp air and realized that the clock by my bedside showed I was an hour behind schedule. And today of all days, I had an important meeting. Rushing to get ready, I left the house and drove to the office. But trouble struck at a railway crossing notorious for rarely opening. Driving over the bumpy asphalt, I stopped my car in front of the crossing and noticed an unusual commotion in the area.
Hey, isn't that kid in trouble?
It'll be a disaster if the train comes.
I could hear the voices of passers-by through my car window. Looking toward the crossing, I saw a young girl crouching there. The alarm signaling an approaching train was blaring, yet she didn't move. At this rate, she could be hit by the train. Thinking that, I quickly got out of my car and ran toward the girl. "Hey, are you okay? Can you stand?" Pulling her arm to help her up, I noticed she had injured her leg. It seemed she had fallen and twisted her ankle while crossing. She must have tripped as soon as she entered the crossing. Though she was panicking and tried to stand, she couldn't manage it. Thinking that my time at the gym was finally proving useful, I picked her up and carried her out of the crossing as quickly as I could. "Sorry for moving you so suddenly." Concerned she might faint from anemia or something similar, I spoke to her while catching my breath. Moments after I got her to safety, I heard the sound of the train passing behind us. The train came to a stop several dozen meters past the crossing. Since I couldn't just leave the situation unresolved, I knew I'd have to explain what happened to the train conductor. "It's okay now," I said to the dazed girl. She was likely in a state of extreme shock after her close call with death. The girl couldn't clearly explain why she had ended up in such a dangerous situation near the train tracks. But I didn't want to force her to talk. Thinking she needed time to process her emotions, I shifted my focus to work. I decided to leave the still panicked girl alone for now and focus on contacting the office. Acknowledging the life-threatening situation that had just unfolded, I moved my trembling fingers to operate my phone. I called the sales department and spoke to David. "David, I'm sorry, but there was a bit of trouble." As I briefly explained the situation, I noticed the train conductor running toward us after stepping off the train. Seeing that we were safe, he looked visibly relieved. As I reflected on how lucky it was that the girl was unharmed, David's cold voice came through the phone.
"I'm disappointed in you. The fact that you were at that crossing at this hour means you overslept, didn't you? If you hadn't overslept, none of this would have happened in the first place."
David knew the crossing and its proximity to the company. He must have realized that if I had woken up at my usual time, I wouldn't have been there. In other words, David had figured out that I overslept. That may be true, but admittedly, he had a point. I might have made it to the office on time if I hadn't overslept. But in that case, the girl's life might not have been saved. And it was David's decision to reassign the deal that led to my late nights and, ultimately, my oversleeping. Being criticized while these facts were ignored left me frustrated. As I wrestled with my feelings, David said something unbelievable.
Some reckless young person who doesn't value their life cause trouble, right? You should have just left that entitled crybaby alone.
That's going too far, David. I couldn't help but snap back, and David sighed in exasperation.
You said you'd do whatever it takes to make the deal succeed, didn't you?
I said I will do my best.
Shut up. Don't talk back.
When I tried to clarify my past statement, David's sharp voice cut me off.
Do you not care about this job? If we fail this deal again, the client won't work with us anymore. What happens to the company if we lose $20 million? Does that not matter to you?
I never said it doesn't matter, but work is important, but abandoning someone in need to attend a business meeting doesn't feel right. The company's profits are significant, but a human life is irreplaceable. I had hoped he'd understand that much. But David, as if to show he didn't care, spat out.
You're fired, you useless liar.
Mocking me, David ended the call with that statement. I put my phone away and held my head in my hands. I still needed to explain the situation at the crossing to the train conductor, but my mind felt clouded. Looking up, I saw the girl I had just rescued watching me with a worried expression. I thought her face looked familiar, and then I realized she was Amelia. I couldn't believe it. The girl who had been moments away from losing her life was someone I knew. It seemed Amelia had also recognized me, and she looked equally shocked. Perhaps recognizing her rescuer as someone familiar had helped Amelia calm down a bit. Looking directly at me, she opened her mouth to speak.
Well, you're heading to work now, right? I think my grandpa should be passing by here soon. Maybe he could give you a ride.
It seemed that Henry also commuted to work using this railway crossing. However, since I didn't know how long the questioning would take, I couldn't agree so easily. While I was contemplating this, more than 10 sleek black luxury cars pulled up nearby. Startled by the unfamiliar sight, I watched as Henry stepped out of the back seat of the lead car.
Oh, Grandpa.
Amelia, what's going on? What happened?
Seeing the crowd gathering around Amelia and me, Henry must have realized something serious had occurred and approached us with concern. Amelia explained the situation to Henry and me. She had been in a rush, like me, and stumbled on the uneven road near the crossing. Although she managed not to fall, it must have put a strain on her ankle, which gave out while she was crossing the tracks, causing her to twist it. Upon hearing about the accident that had nearly occurred, Henry looked astonished.
Mark, thank you for saving Amelia.
I just acted quickly and without thinking. I hadn't acted out of some noble desire to help. Even so, being thanked like this made me feel a bit awkward.
If there's anything I can do to help you, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Thank you, but I'm sure you have a lot on your plate, Henry.
Well, yes, I've been having some issues with an electronics company. But honestly, those problems pale in comparison to my granddaughter's safety.
Later, I had to explain the situation to the station staff and police. During this process, I learned something astonishing from Henry. Henry was, in fact, the president of the company I was supposed to meet for the business deal. He revealed that he had been frustrated for some time over the frequent changes in the sales department representatives handling the negotiations. This revelation was one small silver lining in an otherwise chaotic day. After all, gaining Henry's support gave me a way to turn the tables on David. 3 hours later, I arrived at work in one of Henry's luxury cars. Well, technically, I had stopped by the client's office first to finalize the deal, so my order of priorities was a bit unconventional. When I entered the sales department office, David shot me a disdainful glare. By the way, Henry, who had given me a ride, went straight to the CEO's office for a discussion.
Hey, Mark, what nerve you have showing your face here? A useless slacker who was late for an important deal.
Normally, I would have lowered my head and tried to smooth things over. But since I had already done what needed to be done, there was no reason for me to stay low. David, the deal is already finalized. It was a great success, as you can see. With a beaming smile, I handed David the documents confirming the successful contract. David, who took the papers with a puzzled expression, immediately looked stunned as his face filled with shock.
That's impossible. You were supposed to be late.
Yes.
Then why on earth did it come to this?
Completely losing his composure, David threw the documents he was holding onto the floor. David stomped on the documents, glaring at me with a look full of hatred. His predatory gaze radiated intense animosity and obsession, resembling that of a carnivorous animal. Once he labels someone as an enemy, David shows no mercy. He refuses to acknowledge their success and never stops his harassment or insults. It seems like he won't rest until he drives his target into the ground. It was Henry who spoke to David, whose face was flushed red. Having just greeted the CEO, Henry turned to address David.
Throwing important documents on the floor is hardly behavior befitting a department manager.
David looked bewildered at the sudden appearance of a third party.
And those in leadership shouldn't lose their composure so easily. The people working under you are always watching.
Henry said in a calm tone, and he introduced himself. When Henry handed David his business card, David froze, his mouth agape as he stared at it.
So, you're the one who decided to keep changing the person in charge. Thanks to you, one of our deals has been stalled, which has caused us quite a bit of trouble, David.
Henry's company had initially been open to forming a contract with us, but the frequent changes in personnel had led to distrust. When they asked the new representative for details, they discovered David's unreasonable behavior. As a result, their impression of our company worsened. It seems they were even considering canceling the deal altogether if things continued like this. However, because I had saved Henry's granddaughter, they decided to continue with the negotiations.
And I hear Mark is taking charge of the deal again. That's great news. He's thorough in his work, and my team says discussions progress smoothly with him. The previous representative was inexperienced and awful. Since he's a rookie, it's not his fault. But you bear significant responsibility for failing to assess his abilities properly.
Henry smiled warmly and placed a hand on my shoulder. His kind expression making me feel genuinely appreciated for my efforts. But the next moment, his expression turned icy as he addressed David.
Even if someone lacks ability, Mark is my granddaughter's savior. And yet, you hurled verbal abuse at him? That's unforgivable as a human being.
Seeing Henry's cold demeanor, David's body trembled and he desperately glanced around, searching for someone to back him up. But no one came to his aid.
Changing the person in charge without explanation was also unacceptable. So, David, how do you intend to show me your sincerity?
David, like a broken record, repeatedly apologized. He muttered, "I'm so sorry." But it seemed Henry wasn't satisfied with mere apologies.
Do you really think apologizing sincerely will be enough? You're a professional. Surely you don't believe that just putting in effort will solve everything.
I didn't mean.
David looked like he wanted to argue, but seemed to realize how foolish that would be. After faltering, he resumed his repeated apologies. Henry's attitude, however, remained unchanged. Perhaps realizing that this wouldn't work, David tried a different approach.
I'll send Mark to deliver a gift box later. And if necessary, I'll personally visit your company as many times as needed to apologize in person.
David glared at Henry as if to say, "How about this then?" He must have relied on this approach to get out of tough situations in the past. But this time, it wasn't going to work.
Do you think apologizing this much means you'll be forgiven? This is business. Your feelings of regret can't cover the losses our company has suffered.
Henry sighed and turned his gaze away from David.
There are failures in this world that can't be undone. You've lost all trust, and I will never trust you again.
Realizing there was no longer any chance for redemption, David looked completely desperate.
What did I do wrong?
Leaving the stunned David behind, Henry went to speak with our company's CEO. While he had initially prioritized supporting me and kept his greeting brief, it seemed he felt it necessary to have a more thorough discussion with the CEO. As soon as Henry arrived at our company, he made sure to meet with our CEO and discuss the matter in detail. I thought it wouldn't be rude for him to leave after that, but he seemed to be a conscientious and earnest person. Despite his presumably busy schedule as a company president, Henry insisted I should give a proper farewell and headed back to the CEO's office once more. After work, I stopped by the gym as usual. There, Amelia, the girl I had saved earlier that day, greeted me with a smile.
Thank you so much for helping me out of that dangerous situation.
Amelia thanked and handed me the gift of sweets. As usual, they were homemade cookies, but the contents were different. Today, it was a beautifully decorated cake with intricate patterns. Looking at the cake Amelia had made, I was genuinely glad I had been able to save her. If someone as hardworking and kind as Amelia had been lost, it would have devastated Henry and weighed heavily on my conscience. As I ate the cake, I shared my thoughts. This is delicious. It's good enough to sell at a bakery. Hearing my compliment, Amelia's face lit up with a radiant smile. Meanwhile, David's reputation had plummeted among the employees who had overheard his exchange with Henry. The staff began to see David in a new light.
Did you hear? You weren't around, so you probably don't know, but David got scolded by the CEO of one of our clients' companies. He used to be intimidating, but seeing him get chewed out makes him seem like no big deal.
Really? I've always been careful not to upset him, but maybe David's not as scary as we thought.
These comments came from employees who had been berated by David for not trying hard enough and subjected to his harassment. However, those employees stopped listening to David and refused to work excessively long hours. As a result, they were able to take adequate breaks, which seemed to improve their work efficiency. Their performance steadily improved, and David found himself losing credibility. The employees David had insulted and dismissed as not hardworking enough were simply trying to work efficiently and focus on results. By ignoring David's words and adopting methods that suited their work style, these employees grew and started achieving impressive results. The sales team began to discuss openly.
David's advice isn't worth listening to.
Totally. The employees who are always overworked and exhausted never seem to get good results, and their sales numbers are terrible.
Eventually, David found himself alienated and chose to resign voluntarily. He left our company. Afterward, he tried various part-time jobs, but none of them worked out for him.
Why is it that, even though I'm working as hard as always, no one recognizes me?
Apparently, David would complain like this every day. Even so, someone seemed willing to extend a helping hand to him. That someone was Amelia's mother. As it turns out, Amelia's mother, who had been working as a model, was involved in filming a project. A stunning woman who closely resembled Amelia, she had appeared in numerous movies and TV shows. The major company she was affiliated with needed a large number of extras for the project and began hiring part-timers. David, thrilled to be hired by such a prestigious company, was eager to do well but ended up struggling there. At one point, when Amelia's mother, who isn't very athletic, fell down a flight of stairs, she collided with David at full force. Unfortunately, David was badly injured due to the impact. Though the company compensated him with settlement money and covered his medical expenses, he's now bedridden and unable to move. Meanwhile, I successfully finalized the deal with Henry's company and secured the contract. My accomplishments were recognized, and after David left, I was promoted to his position. At first, I was overwhelmed, unsure of what to do, but I've since grown accustomed to the role. By assigning tasks that matched each employee's abilities, I managed to improve workplace efficiency. Recently, I've discovered a new hobby. It's baking. The cake Amelia gave me was so delicious that I became curious about trying to bake myself. Alright, this is perfectly baked. I'll bring these to the gym next time and give them to Amelia and Henry as gifts. I've been sharing cookies and other baked goods with the two close friends who have become special to me. Balancing fitness with the pursuit of creating delicious desserts has brought joy to my life. The dull routine I once had has transformed into something vibrant and full of color. I'm truly glad I was able to save Amelia that day. If I had ignored her crisis, I wouldn't be living this fulfilling life now. David had insisted I focus on the deal, but if I had turned a blind eye, I'd have carried that regret for the rest of my life. No matter how powerful someone may seem, if something feels wrong, you shouldn't blindly follow their orders. As a manager, I want to ensure I never manipulate others like David did or force my will on them excessively. I have a responsibility to guide and support my team moving forward.